Okay, so look, we're 3 months in, believe it or not, okay, January, February, March, we're just tailing off the end of March, we're coming into Easter now as well. So as we wrap up the first quarter, we're going to take a moment to just assess our progress. For existing clients, we've done all this in the past, we've been through all these things, we've laid it out slightly different this time. We always like to try and obviously evolve everything and keep it going. But I want you to sort of ask yourself the question. We're not going to get answers now, I read anything down yet, but I just wanted you to sort of ask yourself in your head, what have those last 3 months been like? You know, have they been, you know, have you progressed? Have you just sort of stayed the same? I know some of you are absolutely excelling in business and in life, and that's brilliant, but every month we try to push on. Every 30 days, again, we do the 30-day review and reset, but even though you're doing well, there's curveballs always there. There's always problems that are going to come up or whatever else. So whether it's good, bad, or indifferent, it's always good to review. It's good to check on what's working well, what's not working well, and we're going to do all that today. And I've tried to lay it out as simply as possible to make it a wee bit easier for you, just to break it down in different bits and pieces. As most of you all know, again, for clients who have been with me for a long time, this last first quarter, since the new year, have been very, very founder focused. So we've been doing a lot of founder work, where previously maybe last year there was a lot more practical stuff in terms of tracking and numbers and different bits and pieces and team. The last quarter has been very, very founder focused, and there's a very good reason for that. You know, we've done a lot of work about the mission statements, your vision, where you want to go. Some of you jumped in with 2 feet, took it on board completely, flew with it. Some people really struggled with it, and I'm not surprised, to be honest, especially if you're not used to this type of work, if you're not used to the kind of founder work, or somebody asking you about vision or what you want out of your life, you know, or different bits and pieces. That can be a challenging conversation or challenging question for yourself. It's always easy to highlight the issues or the problems you're going through, but sometimes it's harder to know what we're doing, why we're doing it, what good looks like, and sort of giving yourself a pat on the back at times too. No matter what's happened, the reason why we've done this sort of the mission statements at the start is because the vision is crucial. The vision, you kind of need to know where you're going, you need to know why you're doing it, you need to know what the point of it all is. Otherwise, if there's no meaning behind it, you're going to just sort of coast. You're going to struggle. There's going to be nothing really driving you forward. So we have to, like for everybody who's done that at the start of the year, we try to get very, very clear on where we're going to go, and more importantly, why we're doing it and what that end result will look like. We broke it over just one thing over the whole year. And again, we always do that in here. We don't just, we don't focus on 50 things at once. We always try and make one major headline focus, which is another thing that we're going to do today. This also is a bit of a reset. Every 30 days, anyone who's not familiar, we do the 30-day review and reset, and it is a review of the last 30 days. And then we kind of draw a line under the sand again, whether it's been good, bad, or indifferent. We draw a line in the sand. We look at what's working well, what's not working well. But the good thing is, no matter how you thought the year was going to start and how the years actually went, at this point now it's irrelevant, because you either we can draw a line in the sand now, we can right the wrongs, we can double down on what's working well and whatever to finish off the rest of the year strong. So although yes, one quarter is gone already, it should be a bit of a wake-up call for some of us who are maybe coasting, who are maybe drifting, who are maybe wanting to do more, but not to beat ourselves up about it, to know that there is plenty of time left as long as we draw the line in the sand and make the most of it here moving forward. A bit of a Q1 reflection just to get us started, and a wee bit of housekeeping, I suppose. What I do is, anytime we're on a call or anytime we're at an event, I would always say to anybody not to jump into the workbook and try and fill out the workbooks as we're talking. There's always going to be time. I'll go through the questions, I'll go through the slides, whatever notes, to try and sort of coach you through the questions on what kind of detail that we want or what we should be expecting. So try not to fill it in as we're talking. If you want to jot down a couple of things, fine. But there's going to be time at the end after I speak for everybody to jot things down. We'll get time. I'll just watch the room, see who's still working away. And then we'll maybe take a couple of shares or a couple of questions even before we move forward. So there's always plenty of time to fill out the workbooks. Like I said, if you're new to this, just write down the first thing that comes to your head. Don't be panicking about getting the right answer or sharing an answer or anything else. I know it does say a wee bit of a cue at the back there about me asking questions and stuff like that, but I'll know who to ask questions to and who not to ask questions to, so don't worry about that. So question 1 there, inside the workbook. Everyone's got a workbook there, yep. So before we're going to do any sort of scoring or any deep review, It's just a kind of question to get everybody started and get used to writing. And the questions and the conversation gets a bit deeper as we go on. So it's kind of surface level at the start to ease everybody into it. The question is there at the top in bold. What is your biggest win this year so far? And it could be anything. It could be coming on, working with myself. It could be a project that you've won. It could be a conversation you had with a team member that's brought something on. It could be a change. It could be absolutely anything. And we'll try and keep it business related for now. But again, we're going to look at, it could be anything at all, essentially. And then we're going to look at, so the biggest win so far this year, and then why does that matter to you? Because why it matters to you is crucial. Just that headline, question isn't always enough. We have to kind of have an understanding or an awareness, and you'll hear me talking about awareness a lot. We have to have an understanding as to why that's your biggest win so far, the meaning behind it, and why it means something to you, or why it had an impact on the business. So, yes, hopefully everyone got something there, yeah? Yeah, dead on, happy days. And if you're still writing away, right away, there's no big deal. So the next question there, again, pretty self-explanatory, just the polar opposite then. What's been your biggest challenge this year? And again, some of this could be insignificant. It could be something that seems insignificant to some people, but again, a big meaning for you. Something that's been just keeps reoccurring. It doesn't have to be something massively impactful. It's transformational. It could be something simple, like staying on top of the invoice and they're sticking to the founder time. It could be, organization or whatever it is. Try and get as much detail in there as possible. And we're going to move on to then, is this challenge still in your way right now? But the reason why it says that is because a challenge could be something that you've overcame. So it could be doesn't need to be something that is still there, that's still a challenge. It could be something that has happened over the last 3 months at the start of this year that you have overcame, but it's still worth noting down to make sure it doesn't happen again. So the next question there is this challenge still in your way right now? Yes, no, or partly. In other words, yeah, look, I keep kind of getting pulled into site-related stuff. This keeps kind of happening or whatever else. I don't like to give too many examples because sometimes people just pick the example and write it down. So again, I want this to kind of come from you guys. And then the last one there is important. And again, this again puts meaning behind everything we're writing down. So it's not just surface level shit like, I wish it was better organized. Like that's a massive open loop there. Organized in what way? What's not being organized impacting the business, impacting you personally? And what would it look like if you were more organized, or organized in what part of the business? So even try and be specific about what part of the business you're talking about. Is it team? Is it yourself? Is it scheduling? Is it projects? Is it dealing with clients? So try and be specific as possible. So that last one is kind of the most important part of that question too. What would change if you solved it in Q2? So whatever the challenge is, if it was solved, what would it mean to the business, or what would it mean to you? Not just like, it'd be nice, but what impact would it have? What would it change in the business if it was solved, more importantly? And if you're writing down a challenge that you've already overcame, then write in that question there, write down, I need to make sure this doesn't become a problem again because this is what it fixed or whatever, this is what it solved. So again, we'll just take a couple of minutes and get that one jotted down before we move on. And again, you'll see the difference in the answers from some of the guys who've been with me for a long time or some of the guys who are new to this, where they're used to this way. So it's like, no problem. It's easy to pick both, or sometimes easier to pick the wins, because that seems to be more than what's happening recently. But again, it's all person dependent, because even the guys who are usually excelling, we all have good days and bad days and good weeks and bad weeks. Okay, so we're going to move into the scorecard, and this is where things are going to kind of get more structured. So there's 6 key areas on the page, and I want you to score each area in between 1 and 10. And I want you to be real with yourself. No one else is going to see this unless you choose to share it with anybody. So don't write down what you think what good looks like. Try and be as realistic as possible. Also, if you're having a bad day or whatever, I want you to zoom out and look at this over the quarter. So if you're having a tough week or a tough day or whatever else, the phone's been going all morning, try to remove the emotion from just the current time and think about over the last quarter. So from Christmas up to now, I want you to rate it that way. I want you to try and zoom out and think, yes, I may be having a bad week, but you know what? The quarter has actually been dead on. Or, you know what? I've had a good week, but, there's a lot of things that did go on there. It could be better, etc., etc. So try to zoom out. Try to be as honest as possible. Again, sometimes the lower the score gives us a better indicator of what we need to fix first. So again, this is all personal and all very, very person dependent. So try and give as much honestly as possible. So the Q, the 6 areas, and there's a particular reason why I've done the 6 areas. For anybody who's worked with me for a long time knows that we always focus on the same sort of headlines. We've got 5 metrics today we're going to go through, but these are kind of what we deem to be the most important key areas in the business. So Q1 overall, how did the quarter go? Revenue, did you hit what you needed? Maybe you don't know. Maybe you don't know what it is you need, so just write down you don't know. If you haven't got a clue, maybe it's a 1 then. Profitability, did the jobs make the money they should? Again, if you don't know, it's a 1. If you're all over it and you're tracking everything, great. Then you'll know the answer to that question very easily. Delivery, jobs completed on time and to a standard. So that's kind of like callbacks. That's kind of, everything happening on schedule. And again, if you're not construction related, that's just about, tasks, things happening, things going out the door. You'll make it transferable to yourself anyway. Team, did your people perform at the level you needed? And if you haven't got team, maybe everybody in here does have team. Even for you, Nico, think about the lads that you're managing there as well. But anybody who doesn't have a big team, even if that's just a one-man band, anyone that's in the recording, even if that's you, just rate yourself. Did you perform to the level that you needed to? And then you personally, big one, probably more important than the rest of them. Time, headspace, quality of life, stress levels, let's rate that as well. So we're just doing the scoring only for now, so just that top section. And the best way to do it is just be quick about it. So we'll go ahead and take a couple of minutes just to jot them down. I'll watch the room and see how you're getting on with it. So we're just doing the scoring element of now. So next we're going to move into what went well and why. Okay, so it's not just good to sort of, obviously we need to know what went well, but we need to know why. We need to know what was behind the wins, what behaviour, decisions, actions made it happen. And a bit of psychology first. Before we fill this in, I want to go through a wee bit of I'm quite deep into the psychology. Behind everything there is a psychological reason for most things and everything. And it's about, like I say, that level of awareness or that deeper meaning or understanding of what we're doing and why we're doing it and what's working and what's not. And again, for anybody that's unfamiliar with this kind of work, this personal founder work that everyone is doing today, for some of us that's completely alien. And for some of us, we're used to it by now. Some of us have been with me for a long time. That's, it's second nature to you, and that's great. But again, different people, different journeys, different stages. But sometimes, that's why I asked the question early on, the wins are sometimes harder to spot than the problems. Often it's easier for us to highlight what's not going well, and it's harder to identify what is going well. And the reason for that is because the failures or the things that are challenging us or the things that are going wrong tend to shout the loudest. And there's nobody patting us on the back for doing a good job, because most of the things that we do on the founder work is quiet, that we're going to move on to here now. Founder work is quiet. And the wins, there's nobody there because we're all business owners. A lot of it's like a very personal journey. And again, we're always dealing with problems, we're always putting out fires, we're always dealing with challenges and issues, so it's easier to highlight those and identify those. But the wins are usually quieter because there's nobody there patting us on the back to tell us good job or no one, whatever else. So sometimes what went well is harder than what didn't go well. So that's natural again, to be sitting struggling at or scratching our head again. But for some of us who have been here for longer, we're used to that now and it becomes second nature to us. But if you're sitting there struggling with that, it's no big deal. But most of them, they matter equally. What went well and what didn't go well, because we need to know what went well so that we can double down on it. And we need to know the patterns, again, like I say, the behaviours of why things are going well, the structure, taking the time to do these things, the founder work, etc., so that we can double down on that time. What awareness actually means as well, I talk a lot about awareness, and I don't mean in like the fucking airy-fairy manifestation stuff of awareness. I talk about awareness as in that awareness to understand why things are going well and when they're not going well. Understanding when, like that daily diary thing, that's massive. That's why the daily diary is in place for all of us. It's what's planned, what's going well, what's not going well, and identify why those things happened. And again, for a lot of us, we're catching ourselves out now. We've got to that level of awareness where we're going, do you know what? I'm falling back into that trap again. I was getting ahead, I was doing this, I was doing that. That's because I was putting the time aside. I was shutting everything down. I was taking 30 minutes uninterrupted time. I've stopped doing that. I'm getting dragged back into the site-related stuff and getting dragged back into that. But before we go deep into that awareness kicks in to say, do you know what? I can see the pattern reoccurring here, and I need to nip it in the bud before I get too deep into it again. So that's what I mean about a level of awareness. And for some of us, we get the grasp of that straight away. For others, it's harder. But that's what I talk about when I mean awareness. And that's why we don't just ask the surface level, high level question of what's going well. We ask why it's going well. The plan's going well, everything's scheduling's going well because of X, Y, and Z. I took the time out. We're having the weekly meeting every week. As soon as the meeting drops off, everything seems to fall apart. But it's having that level of awareness. It's knowing why things are working well, why things aren't working well, so that then we can double down on either or avoid the other. So 3 specific wins then from Q1, not vague. We want to look at what actually went well and why. And again, I know sometimes for some of us this is harder, but try and get something written down, especially if you're new in this sort of journey or program. It may seem like nothing's going well, and that's why you've reached out. So if that's the case, that's fine. For anybody who has been here for a while, again, and you're still going through a tough time or a tough week or a tough month, try and think of it again, zoomed out over the last quarter. So 3 wins there, and then what was behind these wins? What behavior or decisions made them happen? So it was maybe, for some of us, checking in with myself every week, being held accountable. It could have been taking the founder time, taking a step back from a day a week on site or something like that. It could have been having the meeting with the team to making sure. So for every reason why something's going well and something's not going well, there's always a reason behind it. And I want people to be able to identify that so that we know to have that level of awareness. So just go through those three questions there. Win 1, win 2, win 3. If you can only get 1, fine, but try and get something written down. And then again, what was behind these wins? What behavior or decisions or actions or patterns made it that way or made it so? So again, it could be insignificant. A win could be, for some of us, I know Barry even there as well, like getting an invoice out the door. That's something that was hanging over you for a long time. It's a win. It could be something that's seemingly so insignificant for one person could be massive to another. I know I've laboured that point a lot, but don't think it has to be something spectacular here that you're writing down. It could be even taking time out today to come here, because a lot of people again cried off, I'm busy, falling into the busy category again because it's easier to do so. Okay, so we'll move on there to the next one, which is going to be easier for some people. What didn't go to plan and why? Okay, so understand the setbacks and the root causes for improvement. So even I pick on Graham a lot because he's always has all the right answers at times, but it's good to see how even the daily diary that paid off massively for you, because even the review was something that, like, not just saying that the day was fucked. Why did the day go wrong? Identifying key things, or sometimes it's the same team member, the same problem, the same client, the same action or whatever that happened that causes the same problems time and time again. And when we're able to identify it, then we know exactly what we can fix. For that second part there then, what didn't go to plan and why? Again, it could be anything. It could be a system that wasn't there. Did you not push hard enough? Maybe everything is going well, but you got to be a bit comfortable, because that's always something that can happen. When things are going well, when the bank balance is healthy, when everything's seemingly going well, a lot of people then coast. They sort of go back into that comfort level of everything's going well. We don't really need to push anymore. But again, there's always opportunity there. There's always room for improvement, as again, Graham mentioned. Unless you're scoring yourself 10s the whole way through there's always something else that can be done. So again, try and think deeper of systems, processes, team, decisions that need to be made, conversations you keep putting off. And again, maybe just making a step of putting something in place, or showing up more to the calls, or doing the trainings, or doing whatever it may be. So there's always something. Again, most of the problems they repeat. They repeat themselves time and time again. It's always the same issues. Maybe you've solved the symptom, maybe you've solved like the fire, put the fire out, but you didn't solve the issue. That's kind of the norm for most of us in construction or in business in general. We're going around putting out fires all the time, but once the sort of problem's solved, we're just moving on, and then it keeps reoccurring. So again, it's about getting to the source of the issue, finding out why it keeps happening or keeps reoccurring, and then getting it nipped in the bud, or putting it in place, or getting something sorted. So why is it going wrong? And again, that's what I mean by awareness again. Not just what's going wrong, but why is it going wrong? And again, the action, the behavior, the person, the lack of systems in place, that's what we're trying to get to here, is the root cause, so we can actually start to make a fix to it. And again, we want to try and fix things at the foundation, because just putting out fires or putting a plaster or plastering over the cracks doesn't actually solve the problem. Again, 3 things there. If we can narrow it down to 3 things, try and be specific as possible. What didn't go to plan and why? Again, over the whole quarter, not just this week, today, this month. Look at it from the whole quarter. So from Christmas to now, what hasn't went to plan? Obviously, a lot of us done a lot of work there at the start of the year on the mission statements, Are you on track with that? Are you not? Did you have ambitions or something that you wanted to achieve up to this date and haven't done it yet? Get that written down there. Okay, so next one there is pretty self-explanatory as well. What do you want to leave behind? So the leave behind column, what we've kind of identified there now is what's working well, what's not going well. Again, the reason why we should have the behaviors, the attitudes, the actions, not blocking out the founder time, not taking time out, not having meetings, bad organization, bad structure. To give you a few examples, what to leave behind is, struggling to say no, saying yes to every project, jumping into site when you're not actually needed is a common one as well. Falling into the trap of just being busy all the time. It's easy just to block things in and hide behind the busyness. It's always, again, harder to do that, the founder work than it is to do the putting out fires work, because that's what we're all used to. And a lot of the times the busy thing is just poor organization. So again, a couple of people today had kind of double booked in terms of, do you know what, I had to jump into this, had to jump into that. Realistically, if you pull the curtain back, you don't. It always comes down to organization. It always comes down to boundaries as well. If you're ring fencing something and protecting your time, generally, again, we'll talk about the founder operator stuff. The founder work and that kind of work's always the first thing to go. So they're always the nice to haves, all the things that actually move the needle in the business, like the tracking, like the systems, the processes, having meetings. They're all deemed to be nice to have when we're busy and we're flat out. But when in fact we ring fence that time, like we would with a client meeting or something else, we actually start to see the difference it makes and the impact it has on the business. So it's pretty straightforward, 2 columns, what we're going to leave behind and what we're going to carry into Q2. So again, carrying into Q2, again, is the attitudes, habits that are actually working for you at the minute. So I know sometimes it can be difficult, but turning up to the call every Tuesday night, checking in every Friday, having the conversation with myself, doing the work, blocking out the founder time, having the meeting, pretty self-explanatory. 3 things for each that we're going to carry into Q2 that's working well, and what we're leaving behind that's not serving us anymore into the next quarter. Okay. So if you're still writing away, just write away as I'm talking here. So your Q2 headline focus, pretty self-explanatory, right? And for anybody who is new to this, again, like I said, there's lots of different people in the room. We always focus on one thing. It's easy to write down 5, 10 things that we need to focus on, and most of us do that. We always have a big list of things we need to fix, but you'll obviously see again that pattern of when you write down 5, 10 things you're trying to work on at the same time, nothing really gets your focus. You never really have the opportunity, the time, the concentration to actually fix anything, because you're trying to dilute your focus across 5 or 10 different things that you're trying to fix all at the same time. So it's almost impossible. So for everything, we always pick one headline focus, and we always try and make it something impactful as possible, not something surface level, like something that could be done by the end of the week. Again, we're talking about over the whole of Q2, so the next 3 months, we're talking about something that you want to try and focus on to get right. And again, it's about your managing your expectations as well. If it's bringing a new team member in, if it's finally tracking every project, getting clear on your margins. When we're busy, as that phrase gets through around a lot, that's not something that's going to be easily achievable in a week or 2. That could be something that takes 3 months. It could be something that takes a long time to implement and actually make the new normal and bring into the cadence of your daily routine as well. So that's why we focus on one thing. That's why we only pick one thing to focus on. So try to make it as deep as possible. Try not to just go surface level stuff, because again, we don't want to be writing stuff here that's going to be able to be achieved when you leave here by making a phone call or something else. So a couple of headline focus examples could be to get more founder time, as in if you're 5 days, 6 days a week on site, your headline focus could be to try and block off at least 1 day a week to try to get into the office or try and work on the founder stuff or do this or whatever else. It could be even just blocking off a couple of hours in the week. It may not be a whole day, but a couple of hours each day that'll compound over time. It could be that hiring a new team member. It could be trying to implement a new process or a new system. For some of you who are new and you have a plan, just recently received a plan or are receiving a plan soon, this is kind of buttoned up for you. You'll know exactly what you need to focus on. Everybody in the room should. However, it's good to now ascertain what you believe should be your headline focus, and then after the conversation with me to see what that comes up differently in that conversation. And the same for people who are with me and are on a plan and are in here and have been here for a long time. it's interesting to see then to realign that focus and make sure that we are focusing on the right thing, or we need to adjust that plan, or we need to focus on something else, or whatever it may be. Because again, this can change all the time. Opportunity comes, challenges come, shit happens in general. So we're going to look at what the headline focus is. Then again, we always ask why. Why is this the right focus for quarter 2? Why are we picking this one? What's it going to mean? That next question is great. What does success look like at the end of Q2 if this goes right? In other words, if it was to try and get a day a week, you're working on the founder stuff, working on the business, then that could be finally having process in place, finally having time to catch up on X, Y, and Z, finally being better organized, or having a bit more structure to your week or your day. And what will get in the way? So this is about trying to identify what you believe is going to prevent you from actually achieving this headline focus. So what will get in the way, and what's the biggest risk to staying focused? So what's going to pull you away from it? What are the risks here? Not having somebody there to delegate to, getting pulled into the bullshit. Again, not being afraid to say no, having boundaries in place. Try and think of what it is that's going to prevent you from actually achieving what you're setting out to achieve here. Quite a big one, okay, for some of us here. We're going to come back to this at the end, because this is going to be like your Bible, okay? Now everyone, obviously, we're going to be moving on to the portals. Everything's going to be here for you. We're going to be doing away with paper and different apps and different bits and pieces. Your headline focus is going to be right in front of you on a dashboard. Every day or every minute you log in, there's an app on your phone or on your desktop. However, this is good to always come back to. It's going to be your Bible going forward. We've got a commitment at the end and whatever else. Keeping this handy and looking over this is going to subconsciously, if anything, bring you back to what you should be doing all the time, reading over it. So it's crucial. So try and write down as much detail as possible. Try not to have it polished off yet. Again, I would always encourage everybody to go back over this stuff. But this will be essentially your blueprint, no pun intended, for the next 3 months. So, and we're going to come back to this at the end as well. Once we go through the metrics and everything else, we're going to come back over it and see, has it changed after we've spoke about everything else we're going to touch on here today. So we'll take a few minutes. We'll take about three minutes to go through that. And see how we're all getting on with it. So for anybody in here, any existing client, anyone who isn't new, so not everybody in here will have been on the founder versus operator kind of stuff that we've been working on there again over the last 3 months. But there's 2 roles in every business, and it's understanding the dual responsibilities for each one. Now, when I talk about 2 roles, I don't necessarily mean 2 people. For some of us in partnerships and stuff, yes, that's the case. But even in a partnership, we have kind of 2 hats that we wear, especially if we are in a trade business where we have to sometimes step in on the tools or whatever else, or even just sometimes if we're not and we're past that stage, we still have to then jump into what we call the operator role. So the 2 roles there are founder versus operator. The founder is the work that's on the business. It's the quiet work that nobody's shouting for. And then the operator is the stuff that's the day-to-day. So the operator stuff we spoke on at the start, the stuff that has to happen regardless of who we've got there, what's going on. It's the stuff that has to happen day to day, making the calls, answering the emails, putting out the fires, scheduling teams, just the stuff that gets the business moving every single day. But it's just sort of going through the motions. So that's the operator. That's the operator role. And the founder role is obviously a much deeper role in that. That's the work on the business. And again, the founder work is always the quiet work. So the operator work is something that's required from our team, from our clients, from our staff, from all those guys. But there's nobody queuing up at the door to ask you to share, maybe I am, but to share what your profit margin was on the last project. Your clients don't care. Your team don't care. That only matters to you. So that work's quiet. And that's why I said earlier on, sometimes that's the work that gets pushed to the side as a nice to have. But again, without doing that kind of work on the business, we're kind of driving blind. And we don't really know when we're going through the motions in the operator mode day to day, if the business is actually going in the direction it should be going in. So both roles are crucial. Both roles as well, obviously, have to happen. And for some of us, we are both every day, and we're changing hats all the time. We're jumping in on the tools, or we're trying to do the founder work. But again, both are crucial, but it's important to identify which role you're in and what each role sort of looks like and what you should be doing as the operator and what you should be doing as the founder. For most of us in here, we're trying to transition from that operator to founder, or tradesman to business owner, if you want to call it. Again, both crucial, but it's important to identify which is which. So the founder work, like I say, the operator work is the stuff that has to happen. The stuff that keeps the business moving. But the founder work is the stuff that actually makes tomorrow easier, if that makes sense. So it's the stuff that actually makes the big impact. Stuff that, like knowing your margins on the project so that knows whether your estimating's right. That takes away the stress of, why you didn't win a job, why you did win a job, how many jobs you're priced against, how many jobs you've won. Looking at your margins, looking at all these metrics. They're the things that actually give you confidence in your approach in the day-to-day delivery of your business and dealing with team and dealing with clients. So it's kind of, without that, you are running blind. And believe it or not, we always fall into the operator role because it's easier and it's what we're all used to. But it's important to realise that the founder work is probably more important as the business as a whole. Balance, whether there's balance, I don't really believe in balance as such. It's just about that awareness of when you need to step into this role and when you need to step into that role, and that there's certain founder work that is non-negotiable, that has to happen. And that's why we're going to move into that. And again, the tension there is mostly are being pulled from both roles on a regular basis. And that's why I always talk about boundaries. Like I said to Barry there as well, it's important to ring fence that founder time. It's easy to just fall into the busy thing, but you say you've blocked off your 2-3 hours to do that work, and then a client rings up, oh, you wouldn't do this for me? Yeah, no problem. The answer should be no. Just the way if you were going for a hospital appointment or doing something like that there, or having a client meeting, your own time should be blocked off in that way as well, and as strict as that, and those boundaries need to be in place. Like today is happening, so no, we're not booking in this, we're not booking in that, because we're doing something else that time, and it can be done all around that. So again, it comes down to that organisation, and again, the boundaries that you're putting in place, and only you can do that. Before we move on to the trap then, we'll go ahead while that's all still warm, and we'll go ahead and have breakfast. We're okay for time, so we'll let you get down, eat a wee bit, and then what we'll do is I'll jump back in then as you're eating there. Okay, so again, there was more stuff on there about the founder, that trap we all fall into, founder versus operator. And the trap was, just to summarise it, because I want to move on. I don't want to labour the point either. I want to get to the metrics side of things, which is the most important reason why we're here. But again, that trap of falling back into what's comfortable, which is being busy. The operator work, because we're all so familiar with it, that's why we kind of always revert back to it. And especially, the founder work can be very uncomfortable for most of us who aren't used to it. So that's kind of just talking about that trap. And then again, the shift then. So the shift from actually going from that founder to operator, tradesman to business owner, or just being busy all the time, to being planned, to being organised, being strategic. And there are guys in the room here, and even the two conversations I've had there, especially one at break, was about the fact that these two guys in particular were people who couldn't see how there was any possibility of actually stepping back, and they've done it, and more so they've actually built a team. I think Dan and you, for a prime example, from 6 days a week and evenings and weekends to now there you talked about coming away all together, and that's less than a year. So again, it doesn't happen overnight. So you may see other people's wins and everything else. Some people see other people's wins, and I've had those comments to me before about how it's hard to see or hard to read whenever you're not. But don't ever let that overwhelm you or get distracted, because again, everyone starts from a different place, like I say, different scenarios, different challenges, different things going on even in your personal life that others don't have those challenges or roadblocks in place. So it's important not to get distracted or too focused on what anybody else is doing in here. But again, take note of it, take stock of what is actually possible. But again, that's why we always have the one focus, and that one focus is personal. But the shift is something that we will all eventually get to, and when it is, it's a fantastic thing. But again, there's proof of that in here as well, domestic and commercial. For most of us in the room there as well. Why metrics? We're going to get into the nitty-gritty thing. It's going to be less sort of workbook stuff and more just rating how we're going. Again, for some of us, we're going to be sitting here high scores. Some of us are going to be very, very low. It doesn't matter. What's important here is that we are where we are, and we can identify what stage we're at in business and where we're at, and then we know what we need to work on again, like I say. So why metrics? When things get really, really busy, your metrics, and I've narrowed it down to the 5 metrics, but when you're busy, the reviews stop, everything else can sort of, the meetings stop, and all the founder stuff kind of falls away. But the metrics in your business, and the 5 metrics here that we talked about at a high level, try to narrow it down to 5 to sort of simplify it for people. But if we're not reviewing metrics, then we are running blind. So if you're not reviewing things, you don't have actual numbers in front of you, then we're running on emotion. And I always talk about removing the emotion from business. So if we're not clearly making decisions on our pricing, on our profits, on our team performance, on our schedule and organisation. Like I often hear people saying, I'm not winning any work. But why is that? Why are we not winning work at the minute? Is it your follow-up? Is it your presentation? Is it cost? People always just assume, it must have been too dear, or a client gives that feedback of too dear. But unless you know exactly where your margins are, then that 2 deer could just be you in front of the wrong customer. Somebody who you're competing against, somebody who's on a completely different level to you, maybe a one-man band, you've got a big team. So it's completely all down to the metrics. If you've got your margins and they're locked in, and you know your overhead percentage and all that stuff, and it's there, and you know you can't go below that, then that's the facts and figures of it. But without those facts, again, we're acting on feeling, emotion. We're thinking that, oh, it's this person or this thing or that thing. But again, without the metrics to prove the figures, then it's just pie in the sky stuff. It's just guessing. And I'll often say to people, I think there's roughly now, Kev, at least 200 people a month coming through the funnel to work with me, and I'll often ask them, financially, things going well. Oh yeah, things are going well. There's money in the bank. Well, can you prove, what's your margins? Can you show me that things are going well? They've no idea. And often the level of effort you're putting in and how busy you are isn't always reflected in the bank balance, and that's always a telltale sign too. So the data, in a nutshell, removes the emotion. It removes that knee-jerk reaction of, oh, I'm not winning this, I'm not winning that, or this is a problem, that's a problem, and panicking about it. When we look at the numbers, we're making decisions we're making strategic decisions based on facts and based on whatever, and removing the emotion out of it altogether, because the emotion causes stress. And the reason why we've been founder focused is to try and make a transition into this. And that's why I've been focusing again on that founder. Even though the founder operator, we're going to go into both, I want to make these 5 metrics the non-negotiable. So I want to make these new 5 metrics the founder work that is completely non-negotiable. And I want to make it so simple that no matter how busy your week is, or your month is, or your quarter is, that these 5 metrics are there as a minimum so that you are in the driving seat. So even if it's chaotic, even if these metrics need to be systemized in some way, again, we're going to be going big into automation today. Kev and I are also building building an app in the background as well, even beyond what we've started here today, or what we're going to show you today in terms of the tracking and automating all that tracking. So these 5 metrics need to be a minimum for everybody. So again, no matter what stage you're at in business, these need to be a minimum, need to be reviewed on a monthly basis as a non-negotiable. Let's go into the 5 key metrics. So from today, your monthly check-in is going to be on the portal, and it's going to be kind of asking you roughly in and around these 5 questions. These are the 5 metrics that you're on about here. And your job as the founder to know them. And before we go into them deeply on each one, I just want to see a gauge in the room where everybody is kind of at the minute. I know the answer to most of these questions, by the way, but it's good just to see it in front of you of what you think you know and what you actually know, and whether you can actually prove it or back it up. So it's important there. So we're just going to go through those 5 metrics. Again, there's a wee bit of a guide here for anybody who wants to go back on this and read through it when I'm not talking you through it. But it's pretty simple. It should only take a minute to figure it out. Do you track revenue month by month? And I mean by track, I don't mean like, well, yes. Sometimes could be you kind of sit down and work it out at the end of the month. Yes means you are tracking it live. So all the invoicing is being tracked, everything's covered. You're on top of it all at all times. Do you know your gross profit margin and not markup? For some of us, again, they're new to this. Markup and margin, you'll be scratching and saying, is that not the same thing? But it's not. Do you know your gross profit margin on every single project? Do you know what your minimum is that you're striving for? Do you know what that profit is after overheads, after everything's paid out the door? Yes, no, sometimes, as in maybe do you sit and work it out after a job's done? Do you know your lead conversion rate? So anybody who's not used to that type of language in this game, lead conversion rate, again, can just be jobs that you've priced. So not everything's like a lead. So if you're commercial, you wouldn't be talking about it in leads. You'd be talking about, price and work. But do you know how many jobs you're pricing and the ratio of how many jobs you've priced against what you've won? And are you reviewing that on a regular basis? And then that's having a conversation then around your estimating. Why did we not win that work? Unpopular opinion, most of the time it's not price. I know a lot of you will disagree with that, but it's not. Usually it is either a relationship, how you've submitted it, the information that you've gathered the price from, your pricing structure. There's so many other things that you need to get out of the way first that could be wrong before you blame its price. And even then, if it is price, some of those races to the bottom are races you want to lose. A different type of clientele you want to be working with. Do you know your average job value? This is important because I often hear people talking about the number of jobs. I've got 5 jobs booked in, I've got 4 jobs booked in. But are they 4 or 5 100K projects, or are they 4 or 5 5K projects? So we need to know the average job value. And again, we're going to go into these in more detail of increasing your job value and how it impacts your business. And then, do you know how many weeks or months or whatever years of work you have booked in, depending on where you're at. So for the domestic guys, again, we're going to go into the minimum requirements and everything else. But just to write it down there, do you know how many weeks or months of work you have booked ahead? And we'll quickly jot those down. So we'll just take a minute to get those written down, and we'll move on. Who was, just a show of hands there, rather than getting into each and every individual person, who was, hands up, who was a yes for most of those? And hands up, who was a no for most of them? Dead on. That's even some of those answers surprised me, so there you go. But look, that's great to see the mix in the room as well. And it's funny how the ones who had their hands up second were guys who are relatively newer to working together. So, and it's good to see that the guys who are, except for Connor, he's failed. But we'll blame Nico on that one, will we? Monthly revenue then, we'll move on to. This is not the first metric, monthly revenue. So if you all just turn to that monthly revenue page. And again, we're not going to ask you to work anything out here now. We're just going to score it all as we go through, and then we're going to reflect on it. But there's a good question at the bottom of every one of those pages. What needs to change to move this number in Q2? Monthly revenue is kind of the easiest one to start on. Total amount invoiced in a month. Okay, so we're going to talk about total amount invoiced, not total amount of monies received. And the reason for that is because usually for most of us, the work that is, now this isn't an exact science, you can change this to suit whatever business, type of business you have, but as a general rule of thumb, we're going to talk about the amount that's been invoiced every month, because usually most of us are working 30 days or 60 days or whatever in advance, so or behind. So what we're going to do is we're going to track what's been invoiced that month. That's usually what's current. The work that's been done in the month gets invoiced that month, or it should be at least. I know some of us, that's another whole topic here we've got on here, but the reason why we track what's invoiced that month is that's because what's usually accurate of what was actually work that was carried out that month. So that's why it makes it more accurate than just monies received, because there's late payments, other bits and pieces. So for the purposes of tracking this, we're going to look at the monthly revenue metrics, and we're going to track it month by month. So most of you know your yearly turnover. You know, most of you wait until you go and see the likes of Kieran at the end of the year and find out, you know, right, how do we do at the end of the year? But again, that's not good enough. We should be going primed with this information. We should be going knowing exactly what we're heading into, or what that conversation is going to be at the end of the year already. So we need to track it month on month. It's not just enough to do it on quarter or whatever else, because when we review things on a monthly or more regular basis, even if you're a smaller business, you could do it weekly too. But monthly is a minimum, as a rule of thumb for everybody in here. And it's because then you need to be able to identify patterns. And that's another thing. Quiet months shouldn't just be accepted. I often hear as well, maybe not clients, but other people outside of the program or mentorship, speaking about, this is always a quiet time of year. Even for anybody who should be seasonal in here, it should be done, but like you're busy 12 months of the year, like you're outdoor work, you know, there's not really any reason why anybody in here should be seasonal as such. Yes, Christmas and sometimes when everything shuts down, fine, that's fair enough. When literally sites are shut, whether you're commercial or domestic, got a different mix in the room, as I say, so trying to make it applicable to everybody. We should be able to plan for those months, but what happens is that we identify that there's quiet months, and then we just accept that that's the way it is. We don't sort of build up to it and try and make certain months a higher revenue than others to make up for it, or we don't actually try to go out of our way to fill that quiet period with work. So most of the time, that's how we've just sort of fell into things, and there's certain times a year are quiet, but we don't ramp up our marketing, we don't try and reach out, we don't try and do whatever, we just accept that it happens. So that's just something to note there, that quiet months shouldn't just be accepted as one of those things that it is what it is. We should be, again, reviewing that and then trying to change it. The next one is invoicing on time. So this only works, well, it doesn't only work, but this is most effective when you are invoicing on time. So again, not going to point anybody out, but there's people here who have invoiced even 12 months behind. There's months and weeks and whatever else behind where they should be. And that leaves you in a very sticky situation at times. But also then it messes up this figure. You know, it's not accurate. So it's always important, no matter how small the work is or how big the work is, to have that regular cadence or get into that rhythm of, as soon as something is complete, invoice it out. For some of us, that's completely non-negotiable, and it should be. So metric 1 there, just circle there. Where are you at right now in terms of tracking your monthly revenue? 1 to 2, 3 to 4, 5 to 6, 7 to 8, 9 to 10. So 9 to 10 means that this is just, it happens live as you go. Everything goes out on time. You're so strict on it. 1 to 2 is you do absolutely nothing. You just kind of go through the motions every day, every week, until you get to the end of the year and you sit down with your accountant and say, well, how'd that go? So we're going to score it, your current number, and then we're going to write down our Q2 target. So you can write away there as I'm talking. The Q2 target, we're going to pencil in there as well. So if it's a 1 to 2 now, do you want it to be a 5 to 6, a 7 to 8? And what needs to change to move this number in quarter 2? Maybe you don't spend the time tracking. Maybe you have somebody who you don't check in with. Maybe you could be delegating this to somebody. Maybe you don't have anything in place at all. So write down then what needs to change to actually move this number in quarter 2. Okay, so the next one, gross profit margin. And again, might seem straightforward for you, and what I've even done is broke it down there, but a lot of people, when I ask about margin, markup and margin are not the same things. People who have been with me again for a while, and I said every slide, but I want to differentiate the two things here. Often I'll hear somebody pricing a job, and even Graham, we had this conversation about pricing a job at cost. So every job, you need to be, first of all, before you're pricing anything, you need to be very clear on what your overheads are. And we always work out our overheads as a percentage of our turnover. And again, if this all sounds a bit mental, don't worry about it. It's all written down here, and again, we'll go through it all. So if you're not familiar, you will be familiar with it very soon. But being clear on your overheads is crucial. And what I'll always encourage everybody to do as well is to factor themselves in, whether that is the case now or not. Factor yourselves in as a cost. I hear people still who are like, I don't take a wage, but they live in and out of the business or dipping in and out of the business in bits and pieces. But you should all be paying yourselves a salary of some kind, and that should be factored into your overhead percentage. And because if you're not, even if that's a fraction of the overhead or of your salary, that'd be factored into overheads. Because whenever you're taking those founder days out, those 1 or 2 days, again, some of us have moved on to 6 or 7, their wages need to be completely covered. The point of that is that whether you're physically on site on the tools or not, your wages should be covered. And what's the point in being in business if none of us are paying ourselves? And the issue without factoring yourself in as an overhead is that then you're just eating into the profits. So essentially what you're doing is your profit is just paying your wages. So essentially all you're doing for your business is just covering your wage. And you might as well go and work for somebody else down the street if all you're doing is run the business to just make a wage every month. And for some of us who listen to that might think that's insane. I can tell you now, for 90% of the industry, that's what's happening, no matter the size of business. So it's important. That's the one that always catches everybody out. So your new zero. Another thing we want to talk about here is about, just before we move on to that, is your new zero. About revenue in the bank as well. We need to factor in, if you're looking at your bank account as well, times, and I just wanted to throw this in as a by the by on this slide. Your zero in your bank shouldn't be zero. It should be that number of overheads for, say, a minimum of 3 months. So if your overheads per month are 10K, for example, if you turn over 100K and your overheads are 10%, your new zero should be about 30K. So that should be the revenue that you should be looking in your bank and saying, right, that's made zero. If you're nearing that sort of figure, then that's when you should be, kicking into action. Some of us see the bank account and get comfortable with, there's plenty of money there, we don't need to push, don't need to do whatever. Then that money slowly disappears on one thing or another, or a bill or something that happens, and then we all start panicking. And we all go into that vicious cycle of peaks and troughs of working and panicking every so often based on the bank account. So we need to figure out our new zero. The other thing then, that the new zero, again, about the salary as your overhead, is that also needs to be the same for pricing your projects. First of all, we'll talk about margin and markup. Margin and markup are not equal. People always say to me, I price a job and then I put a 20% markup on it. But markup is not profit margin. Again, you've got overheads and not 20%. So usually when you dwindle it all down, I have clients here from as little as 7% overheads right up to 35% overheads of their turnover. So they need to be adding 35% on to every project at a cost to be breaking even. So that again is your new zero. You need to figure out what your overhead is as a percentage of your turnover, which that calculation is there. And then that's your new baseline. So when you're pricing a job at cost, not pricing a job with, I pay Jimmy £100 a week, but I'm going to sell him out at £150 a week, and then the materials, I'll add 20% here or 30% there. That gets messy. There's no exact sense to that. And there's as I say, thousands of ways you could price jobs, but the only effective way to price a job with absolute certainty is if you factor in the true cost of that project to your business, which is the cost of your labour, the direct cost of your labour to you, including any CIS or anything else, then the materials, any travel or whatever for bigger guys, flights and whatever else, we could take that as an estimate, so many flights per week or whatever else. If we factor that in as the cost, then you add on your, say, 10, 20% overhead figure, that should break even, and then you're into your margin. And when you're clear on what that margin is, whether it's 10%, 20%, 30%, you know that after that job is complete, that's the money that should be in the bank after everything is paid. Because often I'll have a conversation with guys and they'll say, oh, I'm getting 30, 40% profit on every project, but they're not. They're getting 30, 40% markup on every project, and that's why that 30 or 40% after they do that 100K job isn't in their bank account. And they're scratching their heads wondering where the money is, Why have I not got 30, 40% of 100 grand in my bank after I finished that job? I've tracked it and it's all making sense, because it's not 30, 40%. It's 30, 40% minus your overheads. So we need to be very, very clear on that, because again, I'll often have that conversation where I'm getting 30, 40%, but the money's just not there. I don't understand why. And I had that conversation with a client. They're not here today. And we actually realized that there was only, after his markup, the margin was only sitting at about 5% because his overheads were so high. And that 5% to me is not enough of an insurance policy on your project, because as we know, things go wrong all the time, and sometimes we're not always on top of our variations and our changes and different things like that. Our jobs run on, we slightly underestimate it. That 5 or 10% is not enough. Yes, maybe on a, some guys are on big on projects here, 5, 10 million, 5% of 5, 10 million is a lot. We need to be very clear on that. We need to be very clear so that we're not having that mental battle ourselves, wondering why that 20 or 30% markup isn't in the bank account there as a balance. So knowing the gross profit margin is absolutely crucial. And that needs to start with knowing your percentage of overhead. So what is your percentage overhead per your turnover? And the calculation is there. It's pretty straightforward. It's not difficult. And again, this needs to be reviewed on a regular basis, because your overheads can change. You could bring in admin, you could bring on a workshop, you could, whatever it may be. So that's going to be adjusted all the time, and that rate's going to change all the time. Or if you're coming completely off the tools, again, that needs to be paid for, so your overheads are going to increase. And there's ways that we can factor that in then, and we're either going to increase your margins, increase your volume, or do one or the other. But we need to be very clear on what it is first and foremost. Right, okay, so the next one there is lead conversion rate. Lead conversion rate, again, like I said, if you're not familiar with that language, it's just essentially how many jobs you're winning against what you're pricing. And then it's having to really look at that in detail. That's, again, we just touched on there with Anthony, is why this is happening. A conversion rate for projects should be in and around 50%. So you should only be winning about 50% of the projects that you're actually pricing. The sweet spot's around 40 to 60. If you're winning more than 60% of your quotations and you're in high demand, for some of you are winning all of them, you have the capacity there to increase your prices. You're too cheap. If you're sending out every quote and you're winning every job, you're definitely too cheap. Even if you're in high demand and you think, that's why I'm winning more, because I'm fantastic and there's nobody like me. Fair enough, but again, if you're in that high demand, you have the position and the authority to be able to raise your prices, and people are prepared to pay for them. Because if you're booked a year in advance or whatever else in domestic side of things, then you can absolutely afford to increase your prices, and you're definitely playing it too small. In terms of the commercial side of things, then the lead conversion rate as well is very similar. It goes on that scale as well. If it's very low, 15 to 20%, again, it doesn't always, the first reaction is always we're too dear. But unless we're very clear on those numbers and clear on those figures, and we can actually say that at certainty and think, but what can we do here? Because we can't go below this figure, otherwise we're going to be making a loss. So we need to be very clear first and foremost, are we pricing the job correctly? Is our overhead figure right? Is our margin, what are the figures? As soon as we've got that stumbling block out of the way, it is, getting feedback from clients, why we're not winning work. Even when I was commercial, I didn't always go with the cheapest price. It usually was always stemmed around relationships and reliabilities. And especially in the commercial game, like I say, a lot of the times these jobs are won before the price is even submitted. And 9 times out of 10, most of the prices that the contracts managers and people are getting their QSs are check prices. You're being asked to price a job to compare it against somebody else. Sometimes you're even getting misinformation, you're getting wrong information, you're getting whatever to kind of throw you off the scent. So commercially especially, relationships are most important. And also like that, there's certain projects that you're competing against. I've had this position many times where you think you want those big, massive projects, but realistically, when you do the numbers and you're looking back on it, look at the stresses caused, look at the margins you're making. Maybe we're not. Shouldn't be pricing £5 million projects for these guys who are absolutely subby busting us. Maybe we should just be going for the smaller stuff. Like there's plenty of smaller stuff that you have done, again, that had higher margins, a couple of good projects there. So it's doubling down on not just what you think you would like to win, but what you should be winning, again, based on the margins, based on the figures, based on the level of effort, more than anything else. But again, tracking how many jobs you're pricing against how many jobs you're winning, and that conversion rate needs to be known, so then you know where your pricing is, or if there's a problem with your estimate, or how you're showing up, or there's a conversation needs to be had. Like if you're just constantly pricing for the same client over and over and over again and winning nothing, you need to have a conversation, just come out from it and say, what is the point here? Why are we losing this work? And it's not hard to find out in this game who's winning the work and why they're winning the work. So having that conversation is crucial. Again, we don't know We don't know to have that conversation. We don't know what there is to fix until we have that figure of how many jobs we're pricing against, how many jobs we're winning, etc., etc. So just quickly down the bottom of that page there then, what is your conversion rate currently of estimates or sales or whatever it may be? Where are you right now? Where would you like it to be? We always talk in percentages, by the way, and what needs to change to move this number in quarter two. If the answer is you don't know, write down you don't know, and then that's what we need to talk about. Okay, so again, that's just what Barry's saying there, the average job value, something we never usually look at. And there's a simple sort of thing here that if you're going to increase the job value and again your margin, you could actually sort of do, there's either two types of work you can do. You can either do high volume or high margin. That's kind of the two arenas you've got. And you can either do shitloads of work with low margin to try and get that figure, the money built up in the bank, or you can just do high margin work. And again, there's more effort doing the high volume, obviously, than there is doing the high margin. But again, to know that, we need to figure out all the other things on the previous pages. So each page kind of lends itself on to the next one. But again, there's a simple calculation there about the average job value, because I often hear clients as well say to me like, oh, we've got 5 or 6 jobs booked in. Or we can do 4 jobs per month, like our team can do 4 jobs per month. But that's just tracking the number of projects isn't an exact science, because is that 4 small projects or is that 4 large projects? Like, what's the value? So there's usually a ceiling per month that your business could probably take on in actual revenue of work. So looking at that average job value is important, because you need to look at like what average job value are you pricing, are you winning, and again what those margins are as well. So again, important one to track. It goes into a lot of detail there. Just running out a wee bit of time here, so I'm going to try and speed it up. But yeah, the average job value is something that most of us don't do or track that figure, and then we can look at what we can actually fit in to our revenue per month or per quarter, and that's where our targets come from as well. So just quickly there again then, average job value. Do you currently track your average project value? Yes or no? And if it's no, do you want to be, or what do you need it to be? And again, this is all about scalability as well. When you've got sort of like a lot of the times when you've got a higher job value, there's usually less effort required, higher margin as well. So again, the output versus output, or input versus output and all that carry on, all comes into account. So just quickly jot that down and we'll move on to the next one. Again, so there's then the last one there is the pipeline moving forward. And there's 2 types of people in the room, like I say, domestic and commercial. Some of you do both as well. So like I said about the revenue, we're going to look at, the pipeline book, again, it all works hand in hand. The number of jobs we're pricing, the number of jobs we're winning, the value, the average value of those projects, all sort of tells a sign of how much we need to get booked in. So each one of these metrics sort of leads on to the next, and they're all crucial. Again, they all lead one on to the other, and kind of without one, the other one doesn't really work, so it kind of all needs to work hand in hand. That's why these 5 are here. That's why we've selected these 5. So the pipeline forward book. So I would say as a rule of thumb, domestically, 2 months would be an absolute bare minimum of work booked in. The target would be at least 6 months. For commercial, I would like most of the guys in the room here to be sitting with, like I say, most of us are pricing here in 2026 jobs for 2027, 2028 at times, and the bigger commercial stuff. So realistically, if you're sitting here in 2026, you should kind of have your year booked in, and you're pricing for next year, even into later next year. I know some of us domestically are even booked up nearly into 12 months in advance, so you can see the different scale of things there. But again, that's where we need to sort of be looking ahead and not waiting until that month or that quarter and going, shit, we've nothing here. We need to be sort of forecasting this and mapping this out and planning it. And again, there's all things like this inside the resources we have to enable you to do this. And that's what we should be sitting down reviewing as we're meeting, having that weekly meeting or having that fortnightly meeting. These are the kind of figures we need to be looking at to give us that foresight so that we're not panicking when it doesn't come in. So again, there's a great guide there in that of how we're working it out and doing whatever we're doing. So in terms of your pipeline or your forward booking and how far you're looking ahead, are you currently tracking that? Are you tracking what you've got? Are you aware of it? Are you tracking it? Looking into the margins. Are you clear on your margins of what you've got? What your revenue is going to be over the next 6 months? What your revenue is going to be over the next 12 months? What profit margin you're expected to have? Do you kind of have all that mapped out, or are you just looking again job to job Are you looking at, right, we need to get a job in here, we need to get a job in there. You're not worried about the value. But realistically, you should be saying to yourself, okay, our average revenue we need here is 100K or 200K. So how many projects do we need at that? So if we book in one at 100, great, then we need 2 sort of 50K projects to fill in the gap. Or are we just kind of pricing anything, hoping for the best and taking whatever we can? So there's kind of 2 scenarios there. So just quickly jot that one down. Are you tracking currently your pipeline? Are you actively going and seeking a specific value of project, a specific duration of project? Do you know what your company can currently handle in terms of revenue per month? What your team can actually handle? Are you biting off more than you can chew? Or are you leaving yourself short? So great question there. And then are you tracking it at the minute? What your current number is, Q2 target, and what needs to change to move this in Q2. For most of us, it's just start tracking it and get it done. So we'll wrap it up on this one and let Kev do his thing here. So just a wee brief before we actually dive into this one. This Q2 metrics board is going to be great. It's kind of the most important part. We have kind of all the evidence down there on the pages beforehand. This is kind of like a summary. We're going to look at what our current figures are, and if it's you don't know, write down you don't know. Even if your Q2 target, you don't know what it should be, just write down you don't know. And if you're tracking it, yes or no. And again, if you want to score it even, so if it's at a 0 or it's a whatever, just roughly what your score is. The answers are on the previous pages you filled out. And then what I want everyone to do as well is I want everybody to commit there to your tracking day or how you're going to track your numbers, or if you haven't got anything in place, just write I need something or whatever. So I want you to fill that in, what your current figures currently are if you know them. Some of you in the room will, some of you don't. If you don't know and you thought you knew, but you don't know now off the top of your head looking or what it was last month or whatever else, then you don't know. Let's just be real about it. So write down the figure if you have it. If you don't know, write down you don't know. That's a telltale sign itself. Write down the target if you have one. If you don't know, again, write down you don't know, and then that's where you need to have a conversation with myself. And then the weekly tracking rhythm. So I want you to try and commit to this. Again, this is going to be something that we're going to be putting in place anyway, but I'm going to be taking everybody through what the requirement is, how to work them all out if we're not working it out, so that everyone can do this comfortably. I'm not going to ask us of somebody without showing them the steps of exactly how to get to what they need to get to in order to achieve it. So don't panic on that sense. So again, just write that down there as I'm talking through it. Your monthly revenue, your gross profit margin, your current conversion rate of estimates, your average project value, and your pipeline in terms of weeks, what you have booked in there and what it would like to be. So if it's 2 months and you want it to be 6 months, if it's a year or whatever it may be. So get it written in there. And then your tracking day. Let's get that booked in. Or if you genuinely don't know, just put something down there and we'll work towards it, what you'd like it to be. Think of what day right now might suit you. Or if it's absolutely nothing, then again, that's something we need to work on depending on how deep you are into the program. Don't really worry about the last one if you're not sure. I'll track my numbers in Spreadsheet, Zero Notes app. Again, we're going to be building our own software into this as well. So then the last page, we'll keep working away at that, sorry, as I'm talking, just fill them in. The last page I'm going to leave to yourselves, which is just that Q2 commitment. And if we had time today, I would have went through it today, but I want you to keep this sort of neat and tidy. I want you to use the other bits of, the other pages to do your rough work, and I want this to be kind of a neat thing, and this needs to be somewhere where you can be reminded of it all the time. You know, leave it in the office, look at it on a regular basis, just to sort of remind yourself of where your focus needs to be, and that'll give you an awareness of whether you're actually drifting or you're staying on track as well, or if you need help with it. Most of the time, everybody in here, you may need help staying on track, accountability, and that's why you're all here. But again, having that awareness to be able to know by April if we're still on track, by May if we're still on track, and if we're not, we need to be reaching out and asking the question. Just to show of hands then, how many of you knew those figures off by heart? Thereabouts. Anybody else, any questions on that? No? Happy enough?